Welcome to Inspiring Prayer. Have you ever experienced losing everything you have in just one day? I have. My name is Job and this is my story. Among all the people in the East, I was known as the most successful man. I owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. I also had numerous servants to attend to my needs. Moreover, I was blessed with 7 sons and 3 daughters. I'm a God-fearing man who always shuns evil. Whenever my sons held gatherings and invited their sisters to eat with them, I would make sure they were purified. In the early morning, I would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking that they might have sinned and cursed the Lord in their hearts. One day, while my sons and daughters were celebrating with wine at my eldest son's house, a life-changing event occurred. A messenger came to me and announced that the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing, but the Sabaeans attacked and took all of them away. The servants were killed, and the messenger who stood in front of me was the only one who escaped to bring me the news. As he spoke, another messenger arrived, and with a trembling voice, he conveyed even more distressing news. He reported that a blaze of light descended from the skies, and the sheep, along with their keepers, were consumed by the fire. Once again, the messenger standing in front of me was the sole survivor. As I was still speaking, I received news of another messenger who brought unsettling news. According to him, the Chaldeans had formed 3 raiding parties and attacked our camels. The servants were put to the sword, and I was the only survivor who managed to escape. Just as I was trying to gather my thoughts, yet again, another messenger came to inform us that our sons and daughters were enjoying a feast at the oldest brother's house. However, a powerful wind suddenly struck from the desert and brought the house crashing down, killing everyone inside. I felt utterly broken at this point and could not believe what had happened. I couldn't contain my grief and subsequently tore my robe and shaved my head. My heart ached, and I fell to the ground, moaning in despair. The fact that my worst fear had become a reality was too much to bear, and I found myself using a piece of broken pottery to scrape myself in anguish. As I sat amidst the ashes, my wife approached me and asked whether I was still holding on to my faith. In a surprising turn of events, she suggested that I should curse God and die. These were the very words spoken by the woman I had vowed to love and cherish for all my life. Despite the heartache and pain, I chose not to react to her words with anger or hate. Instead, I replied calmly and reprimanded her, saying that she was talking like a foolish woman. I explained that we must accept both the good and bad times that come our way, and that blaming God for our troubles is not the solution. I did not hold God accountable for the misfortunes that had befallen me, and I chose not to utter words of sin. When my friends, Alif, Bildad, and Zophar, learned of my troubles, they came from afar to comfort and sympathize with me. All 3 of them were much older than I was. However, when they saw me from a distance, they could not recognize me. When my friends arrived, they were overcome with sorrow and grief, and began to weep loudly, tearing their robes and sprinkling dust on their heads. Without saying a word, they joined me in sitting on the ground for 7 days and nights. All the while, they could see the extent of my suffering and empathized with me. After spending some time in silence, I could no longer hold back the pain and despair inside me. I opened my mouth and began to curse the day I was born. In a fit of desperation, I cried out that the day of my birth should be forgotten, and the night I was conceived should be turned into darkness. I wished that God would not care for that day, and that no light should shine on it, for it had brought me nothing but misery. I found myself questioning my purpose and existence. I was filled with uncertainty, wondering why a life of misery and suffering was granted to some, and why the bitter of soul were given the same. I had even longed for death, but it had not come, and my search for it was more profound than anything else. I couldn't help but wonder why those who had reached the grave were filled with gladness and rejoicing. I felt my way was hidden, and God had hedged me in. My daily food became sighing and groaning like water. My biggest fears had come to pass, and I had lost everything. There was no peace or quietness in my heart. Only turmoil remained, and my spirit was broken. The grave awaited me, and I had no choice but to accept it. The mocking voices of others surrounded me, and I couldn't bear the hostility in their eyes. In desperation, I prayed to God, "Give me the pledge you demand. Who else will put up security for me?" Tears blinded my eyes, and my whole body felt as though it was but a shadow. My days had come and gone, and I felt as though all my plans had been shattered. During this time, my 3 friends, Alif, Bildad, and Zophar, came to console me. They were kind and intended to strengthen me in my suffering, sharing their views on why God allows people to suffer. Their belief was that I was plagued by sufferings because I had done something wrong. As a result, my friends repeatedly encouraged me to admit my mistakes and repent, so that God would bless me again. In their view, my pain must have been due to some sin that I had enacted, so they advised me to seek God's favor. Bildad and Zophar shared a similar opinion, and argued that I should attempt to manifest more innocent behavior to avoid provoking God's justice. In short, my friends believed that my sufferings were a form of punishment from God, and I must have somehow brought them upon myself. Hence, they recommended me to change my ways and seek forgiveness from God. Bildad had his own views, whereby he surmised that my children had brought their deaths upon themselves. Zophar, on the other hand, was not pleased with the words that Bildad had uttered and replied, "Are all these words to go unanswered? Is this talker to be vindicated? Will your idle talk reduce others to silence? Will no one rebuke you when you mock?" I had stated that my beliefs were flawless, and I was pure in God's eyes, but Zophar wasn't convinced. He wished that God would speak, revealing the secrets of wisdom to me and opening my heart to the 2 sides of true wisdom. Furthermore, Zophar reminded me that God had forgotten some of my sins and was great at recognizing deceitfulness. Whenever he saw evil, he would take notice. Finally, Zophar argued that if I devoted my heart to God and stretched out my hands to him, then everything would be all right. His advice was that I should turn to God and rely on him for my redemption. According to my friends, the sure sign of God's judgment was the troubles that had befallen me. However, I feared God and shunned evil, for I knew in my heart that righteousness was the way forward. At one point, I grew weary of my friends' words and responded by telling them that they were the only people that mattered, and wisdom would die with them. I made it clear to them that I had a mind of my own and was not inferior to them, and I knew much of what they had said. I also agreed with their words to some extent, that if I put away the sin in my hand and allowed no evil in my tent, I would be lifted off my guilt and stand firm without any fear. The memory of my troubles would fade away like water gone by, and I would forget them altogether. Although I had called on God, He graciously answered me, and I remained a laughing stock amongst my friends. Despite being righteous and blameless, they continued to smear me with horrific lies. I longed to speak to the Almighty and argue my case with Him rather than vile and deceiving friends who spoke wickedly on God's behalf. I knew they were worthless physicians and they shouldn't dare argue the case for God. If only they would be silent, that for them would be truly wise. I urged them to listen to my pleas and consider my words carefully. I asked if it would turn out well if God examined them. Would they dare to deceive Him? Would they try to show Him partiality? I challenged them, saying that God would surely call them to account if they secretly showed partiality. The very thought of His splendor and might would terrify them beyond measure. Wouldn't the dread of God's might fall on you? Even if He were to slay me, yet I would hope in Him. I would surely defend my ways to His face, and this would eventually lead to my deliverance. No godless person would dare to come before Him as I have. I have already prepared my argument, and I am confident that I will be vindicated, but I am also willing to face any charges brought against me. If anyone can accuse me of wrongdoing, I will remain silent and face death without fear. I have only two requests from God: to withdraw his hand far from me, and to stop frightening me with his terrors. Then summons me, and I will answer, or let me speak, and he can reply to me. All the wrongs and sins I have committed, I would like to know. I was more than willing to face God and ask him to show me my offense and sin. However, I felt as though God had hidden his face and considered me an enemy. I felt like he had fastened my feet in shackles and kept a close eye on all my paths by placing marks on the soles of my feet. All the suffering had made me bitter, anxious, and scared. I deplored the injustice of how God let evil people thrive. I wondered if God and many other honest people would need to suffer as well. I wanted to protest to God about the injustice that was happening, but couldn't physically locate him. I told my friends that, as surely as God lives, who has denied me justice, the Almighty who has made my life bitter, as long as I have life within me, the breath of God in my nostrils, my lips will not utter anything wicked, and my tongue will not speak lies. I'll never concede to your argument, even if it costs me my life. My honesty is integral to who I am, and I'll always uphold it. My principles dictate that I'll stick to my conviction, and nothing will sway me from it. My soul will stay pure, and I won't feel guilty about my stand. However, life can be unpredictable, and sometimes the Almighty intervenes. When you're suffering tremendously, defending yourself can be challenging. My biggest struggle was physical. My body was covered in sores, and I was enduring agonizing pain and exhaustion. Besides, my pain was more than skin deep. It was social. The locals had heard of my tragedy, and they'd shunned me. The sight of me made them uneasy, and they deliberately avoid interactions with me, which was disheartening. Ever since I parked myself on the ashy bench at the edge of the village, even the youngsters smirked at me. I was in agony, both emotionally and mentally. I couldn't fathom why such unfortunate events were befalling me. It was particularly confusing since I had nothing regretful in my past. The spiritual agony was the worst, though. I felt disconnected from the divine, and it was excruciating to bear. It's much harder to endure suffering when one feels that God is indifferent and far away. However, when I finally talked to God, things didn't go as expected. Despite my numerous attempts, over 36 times, I couldn't hear a response from the Almighty. Finally, my desire was granted as the Mighty One spoke to me. He quizzed, "Who are you with your uninformed sayings, which obscure my plans? Gird your waist like a warrior, since I will question you. Tell me, where were you when I formed the earth's foundation? If you know, who marked off its dimensions, or who laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang in unison and angels rejoiced? Who contained the sea behind its doors when it first burst forth from the womb? Who gave the clouds their dress and covered the sea with dark mist? Do you know of the doors and bars that I set to contain the sea? When I tell it to halt and it goes no further, have you ever seen the morning or instructed the dawn to arise, telling it to take wickedness by the edges and shake it off the face of the planet? The earth takes shape like clay under the seal, while its traits stand out like garment features. So tell me, can mortals argue with the Almighty? Can anyone find fault with God? I felt entirely unworthy to answer. Thus I placed my hand over my mouth in silence. I spoke initially, but I have no more replies left. Then the Lord retorted, "Are you willing to dispute my fair judgment, seeking to justify yourself? Can your voice rumble like God, and do you have an arm like His? Adorn yourself with honor and majesty, put on splendor and dignity, and unleash your fury. Extinguish the wicked in their haughty stances, bring them down to the ground, and humble the proud while crushing evil on the spot. Bury them all in the dust together and shroud their faces in the grave. Only then will I openly acknowledge that only your right hand can save you. Behold, what a mighty creature I have created with you, which grazes on grass and has the strength of an ox. Its loins are powerful, and its belly is filled with muscles. When it moves, its tail sways like a cedar tree, and its thighs are incredibly strong. Its bones are as tough as bronze tubes, and its legs are like rods of iron. It is indeed the most remarkable of God's creations, yet even its maker could approach it with a sword. In the hills, all the wild animals play nearby, and the marsh is its hidden domain. The lotus plants offer it shade, while the poplar trees surround it by the stream. The raging river does not intimidate it, and it remains safe even if the Jordan surges against its mouth. But can anyone capture it with their eyes or trap it by piercing its nose? As I marveled at this creature, I dropped to the floor and said, I know that you have joined forces with me to create such a wondrous being. I am aware that I can do all things, and no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Once you asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I had talked of things that I didn't understand, things too impeccable that were beyond my grasp. Then you said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. I was always aware of your existence, for my ears had heard of you. However, after beholding your presence with my very eyes, I despised myself and grieved in dust and ashes, repenting of my misdoings. Thereafter, the Lord instructed my friends to sacrifice a burnt offering and me to pray for them, because he was infuriated with them for not speaking the truth about him. It's worth noting that each time God spoke to me, it was always in the midst of a storm. God reminded me that he is the creator of everything, and he sustains the world through his awe-inspiring activities. He inquired whether I could match his work. The Lord finished by questioning whether I was in any position to judge him. He further explained how it was disrespectful for me to believe that he should explain himself to me. As a result, I suddenly felt small, less important in his presence. However, as God's servant, I felt vindicated. Sadly, my 3 friends were severely chastised by God, who pointed out that they have not spoken accurately about him. The remarkable thing about God's 2 rounds of conversation with me is that he never answers my inquiries explicitly, leaving me in perpetual wonderment. I prayed to my Lord for my friends, and he granted my wish. He restored my fortunes and doubled my possessions. Soon after, my dear ones, including my siblings and acquaintances from my past, gathered at my house and shared a meal with me. They comforted and consoled me, presenting me with silver pieces and gold rings. The Lord blessed me in later life more than ever before. At the height of my prosperity, I owned 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yokes of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys, and I was content. Share this video with a friend who needs it. Subscribe to get new and impactful prayers. Be sure to click on the bell button and select all for updates. Learn about the reasons why God blessed popular heroes in the Bible, such as Esther, Samson, Gideon, and others. Our powerful new series will provide you with these insights, but don't delay, spots are limited. Click the link in the description to find out how you can receive it for free.